Hey guys, day 28, and I want to spend the last couple days talking about different ways you might find the need to transition. So, I'm not sure anybody really has the goal in just a 30-day time frame to transition to maintenance, but you're going to need to know these things. Even clients that we work with who might only work with us for 3 months or 6 months, maybe they have a goal that is going to take them longer, but they wanted that initial coaching with us to move them through a process and now they feel independent. I still tell them it's extremely important that even if you don't go through that process with us, the transition to maintenance is possibly the most critical step. And we know that people can lose weight, right? We lose millions and millions of pounds a year as a country, but more than 95% of people gain all that weight back. I read one study where at the end of 5 years, the average dieter weighs 107% of where they started. So that's pretty dismal, right? The fact that we have those kind of stats working against us show that we have to be even more diligent about the process building back up to maintenance and then having sustainability strategies. So again, I have to say that the entire premise of this discussion, this workshop series, has been structured flexibility. So we've got that structure that's important, not just to start with, but a structure that we can rely on whenever we need it. It's built on knowledge of physiology, knowledge of our own body type, knowledge of nutrition, and those are all the things that we're going to have tucked away to use forever. We've gained a lot of new tools that we can pull out whenever we need them. But then we also want to live in the real world, right? So we've got a lot of flexibility issues, flexibility with food, food sources, timing, food amounts, all those things. So a lot of different layers of flexibility that are fantastic, but we never want to take our eye completely off of structure. And a lot of times that's what happens when people move from dieting and maybe they had some great success over toward what they perceive is going to be maintenance. That's their goal. But in fact, they just kind of start eating haphazardly or go back to some bad habits and they gain all that weight back, sometimes very quickly. Sometimes it's very tragic to see how predictable and fast that can be. So what's going to make the difference? It's going to be that you have a strategy to get yourself back up metabolically to the best place for maintenance. And then we're going to have to discuss some of those strategies of how to maintain. Even people who have struggled with weight loss, how do they finally win and they're able to stay lean? So first of all, I want to talk about one more important concept that might be new to you called metabolic building. So you've heard a couple phrases that I've used to help people understand and to help describe some processes in the body. So things like structured flexibility as an overall premise of how to approach nutrition. And then I talked about metabolic positioning, how we get to that place where we're using the right range of carbohydrates as energy from internally, meaning our stored glycogen, and then the appropriate use of body fats as that energy substrate that we're trying to lose. And we know we can go too far and we're losing weight so fast, depleting carbs too much, that we start risking losing lean body mass, muscle tissue. We start suppressing our metabolism. But then if we're not careful, we can overconsume carbohydrates and we end up losing weight at some points, and then we're back to the starting point, and it takes us 3 or 4 days to get back here. And a lot of inefficiency is tucked away in that misapplication of metabolic positioning. But if we get to that place and we're losing weight in the right ranges, not too fast, not too slow, we're working within our metabolic structure, genetics and so forth, body type, then we're getting the best of both worlds and we're not dealing with this inefficiency going back and forth. And as I said, you can lose weight up to 50% faster over time eating the same amount of calories because of that efficiency versus inefficiency. So structured flexibility is important. Metabolic positioning is critical, as I just said. And then talking about the needs of moving into maintenance, we're talking about metabolic building. You've heard some people maybe use the terminology. Once I wrote about this several years ago, maybe about I think 10 or 12 years ago, I first wrote for a fitness magazine, The Process of Metabolic Building. Somebody took that information and they coined the term reverse dieting. And I don't like that term really because it's it's not reverse dieting, so to speak. Maybe in a technical linguistic way, but it just doesn't make sense that, anyway, you're putting those two phrases together, those two words. Anyway, metabolic building to me is more descriptive because you're taking your metabolic rate or structure where you are right now. This is what it takes for you to be losing weight and so forth. And we know that there's going to be some metabolic adaptation. So your body is adjusting, and you've been down here for a while. Your body's now leaner and more efficient. And now we're going to start increasing calories. And if we do it too fast, if we just start dumping calories in, then you can regain a lot of body fat, and that becomes a problem. Obviously, that's what we're fighting against. But if we do it incrementally, you create this stair-stepping upward spiral of chasing your metabolism upward. So you might remember I used the phrase neuroplasticity a couple sessions ago, where I talked about how your brain is in a circular loop of creating thoughts that then changes itself, and that impacts the way it can even generate thoughts. And so it's this circular process. It can go really, really positive, or it can be a very negative direction. Well, metabolism is kind of the same. Yo-yo dieting suppresses your metabolism. Dieting too fast suppresses your metabolism. The way we increase our metabolic capacity and metabolic rate is by eating more food, or even just being heavier, but that's not the price we want to pay for that, right? We don't want to be overweight just to be able to eat more. Not exactly what our goals are. But if we do that too fast, as I said, if we start throwing in too much food, we end up having a lot of extra body fat to contend with, which then makes us perhaps go back into a diet cycle, which can suppress our metabolism even further. So we have to gradually move this up. And I want to give you a couple examples. The context of me even developing this as a dietary concept happened because of a client of mine who just happened to be in Canada. She was a bodybuilder. She's actually an academic. She was a principal of a school, and she was an ectomorph, so slighter build, hard time competing against some bigger, more muscular women. So we had to, really worry about maintaining a lot of muscle mass as we got her leaner. So as it would happen, she started dieting at the beginning of a year for a contest, and something happened at that spring show, I think an illness maybe in the family, and she couldn't compete. But had already been dieting. So we had to pull her calories up a little bit, give her a little bit of a break, and then she was dieting again for a fall show, and then she ended up doing really well there, won her pro card, and then we were going for a world championship in November. But yet, think of all that. She had been dieting now for 9-10 months, and we really risked her kind of crashing metabolically. So at one point, I was able to see her, and I thought, my goodness, she's got cross striations in her lower lats and so forth, and she was so lean, which is the asset of being an ectomorph. But I thought, man, we got to start making sure we're buffering against muscle loss. We got to start moving her food up. And every time I would move her food up a little bit, she kept losing. I'd move her food up, she'd lose. I'd move her food up, and she would lose. So it took me about 4 to 6 weeks to finally get her to stop losing weight. And in that amount of time, we had tripled her carbohydrates incrementally. And again, she was still losing. It wasn't just dumping a ton in there. And her body weight came up about 6 or 7 pounds. And a lot of that was because we were refilling these glycogen stores in her body. So her muscle tissue was getting fuller and more off-season-ish in terms of the glycogen storage levels, which was obviously helping her even in the gym. So strength, lean body mass, fullness was improving, and her body fat was cut in half. Her caliper measurements reduced by 50% while we tripled her carb levels up to almost doubling of her calories. And she ended up, by the way, winning a pro world title, overall pro world championship as a lightweight. And I guarantee she wouldn't have done that had we not been forced to go through that process. So imagine anybody, maybe not in that performance realm, dieting, who just reaches their goal and then they just start eating whatever they want. They would start gaining body fat, and they would never have the benefit of being able to incrementally build their food intake up and get the best of both worlds. They are metabolically building, and at the same time, they're increasing performance, if that's their goal, and so forth. So that's a really important concept, guys. I want you to keep that in mind. Metabolic building as we talk tomorrow about sustainability. So come back tomorrow and we're going to go through that, and we're going to keep this thing rolling right to the finish line.